Well, thanks for joining me in the kitchen today for part 3 of making prosciutto at home. So if you remember from part 1 and part 2, we salted down our prosciutto, then we got it inside the drying chamber. It was 20 pounds and 9 ounces when I hung it a couple of months ago. It's gotten down, it's lost weight now. It is down to, what do we have written down? 16 pounds and 2 ounces. So we've lost roughly 20%, which was our target. And now we're ready to do the next part of the process. We want our prosciutto to lose somewhere between 35 to 40%. If we were just to leave it in the cellar drying this way, what we'd find is the parts that are exposed, so all the meat areas that are exposed, they would start to dry out and become really hard, almost inedible hard. So what we want to do is we want to really slow the drying process down. This is going to allow the prosciutto to really get and develop complex flavors inside it. So I made a little video on how to make Sunya. So Sunya is a combination of rice flour and lard. And the Sunya is going to act in the same way that the skin and the fat does. It's going to give it a protective layer. And what will happen when we apply the Sunya, the drier parts right now are going to get an equilibrium. So everything, every part of prosciutto is going to come to about the same consistency in terms of dryness. It'll still continue to dry and lose weight. All we need to do is just cover off the areas that are exposed. Now looking at this prosciutto, now it's starting to look more like a prosciutto than it did when we were first hanging it up and preparing it in the early stages. You'll notice that it's darkened up a lot in color. It's shrunk in size considerably from what it was. If we turn it over here, the skin's also taken on a darker color as well. Now we don't have any white mold growing on this prosciutto, but it's not uncommon to have some of that depending on what your conditions are like where you're hanging it. So if you have a little bit of that white mold having developed on the prosciutto, before you apply the Sunya, what you're going to want to do is a day or two before, you're going to give it a nice good rinse and scrub off with pure vinegar. Then make sure it dries to get all of that moisture out first before you apply. We're really ready to go right now. Now the first thing we're going to need to make our Sunya is some lard. We're going to make it from scratch today. So I stopped by the butcher earlier back and I picked up some fresh pork fat. I'm just going to cut the pork fat into some thin slices. And making lard is about as simple as it gets. We just need an oven, a pot, and pork fat, and that's it. Now I'll take the thin slices, I'm going to put it into a pot. Ideally you want a heavy pot, so it could be a Dutch oven, cast iron, or in my case I'm using a thick visionware glass one, and that'll just keep the heat very even. When we're making lard, there's a few different ways people do it. You hear a lot of people say you need to put a little bit of water in the bottom of your pot. Because we're going to be using this lard to make our coating for our prosciutto, I want to make sure that there's no water whatsoever inside the lard, because the water can make it go rancid. So what we're going to do is we're not going to add any water at all, and we're going to cook it at a low temperature in the oven. At 250 degrees is a great temperature. It's going to melt the pork fat and turn it into a clear liquid. And it's not a high enough temperature that we're going to burn anything. You know, sometimes people say putting water in is going to keep your fat from burning or browning up. The truth is, if you keep your temperature low, as it should be, you're at no risk of browning up. It's going to take a little bit of time, so we're going to stick this in an oven at 250 degrees. I'm not even going to bother checking it till about 3 hours, and then I'm going to give it a turn. This is going to take maybe about 4 hours, maybe 5 hours until it turns into a liquid. And then we're going to drain it off. And that's as simple as it gets. You could make this up well, a day, a week before, it doesn't matter. Well, here we go. We've got our fat all cut up into strips. I'm going to take a lid, put it over the top, stick it in the oven at 250 degrees, and we're just going to leave it sit, and we'll check on it in about 3 hours time. I've had the pork fat in the oven at 250 degrees for, I think it's about 6 hours now, and it's nicely rendered down. So I'm going to take it, I've taken the lid off, I'm going to take it and I'm going to strain it through a sieve with a little bit of cheesecloth, just to make sure that, any solid particulates don't go through. So we're going to pour that through, there we go. And before I make the Sunya out of a lard, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this to room temperature. It's going to start to turn white in color, get thicker, but it's not going to become rock hard, which it will when I put it inside the fridge. So if you're going to be making your lard a few days or weeks before, it'll keep perfectly fine in the fridge. Just make sure that you take it out of the fridge and you leave it for a few hours to come to room temperature, so it's going to be nice and soft and easy to work with. The lard is down to room temperature, so we're all ready to make the Sunya. We're going to mix equal parts of lard and rice flour. So when you're looking for rice flour, it'll often be in the ethnic section of a supermarket, or if you go into an Asian specialty food store, you're going to find that you do need to use rice flour for the Sunya. And we're going to combine equal weights, not equal parts. So it's not going to be by volume. You need to have a scale, so you're going to have to weigh your lard first, and then it's easy just to go ahead and weigh the amount of rice flour that you're going to put in. So I'm going to put the lard in a bowl. It's nice and workable. As I mentioned before, if you were storing your lard in the fridge, just make sure you bring it out and let it get to room temperature for a couple of hours. Okay, let's go ahead and mix in the rice flour. I don't add anything other than rice flour and the lard to make my Sunya. If you live in an area, maybe you're hanging it in a cellar where you may have the odd fly here and there, you can go ahead and add black pepper, just some coarsely ground black pepper into it. I've got a nice chamber area, so I don't need to bother doing that. It's not going to add any flavor to the prosciutto if you put the pepper in, so there's no downside to doing it. I'll combine a little bit with a spoon, but at the end I'm going to have to knead this the same way you would if you were making dough. So I've got washed clean hands. I'm just going to go ahead and start to combine that. Just work your dough slowly, and all of that lard and rice flour are going to combine. There we have it. We've got our Sunya mixed up. It is sticky as can be, kind of like peanut butter but white, and that's really the way that you want it. It's going to adhere very well to the prosciutto. So I'm going to clean my fingers off as best I can. Then I'm going to wash them up, and I'll show you through the next step of how we apply this onto the prosciutto. I've got clean washed hands. I'm going to start to apply it, and it's going to be messy. Not that it's going to fall everywhere, it's just going to be really messy and sticky on my hands. I'm going to try to get it on all of the meat areas to give it a really good coating, and I'm going to put a little bit just on the exposed meat at the back end of the hock. And once I've got that all covered, I'm going to wash up, clean up my hands, and I'll talk about what the next phase and step is. If you played with silly dough when you were a kid, you're going to enjoy this. It's a similar texture, only a lot stickier. And when you're making up your Sunya, just make sure that you have more than enough. This is something that you don't want to chintz on. You want to make sure that all of the exposed areas that just have meat showing are going to be covered well and give it that protection it needs, so that it can dry really slowly and develop those wonderful flavors of your prosciutto. I'll put a little bit here just in the back of the hock. Want to make sure we have a real good coating around that ball socket that we exposed when we were butchering it up in the first part of the video. Well, there we go. We've got it all covered now and well protected. I'm going to clean up these hands, and I'll join you again in a couple of minutes to talk about what we're going to do next. All right, I'm all cleaned up again. This is a lot like icing a cake, except much stickier, and you don't want to lick your fingers after you've done this. So this prosciutto is ready to go back and get hung in a cellar. I'm going to hang it, and I'm going to continue to check the weight with my digital scale periodically. So if I'm trying to get to 35 to 40% of the original weight of when we made it, I'll be looking to achieve somewhere between 12 to 13 pounds. This is going to be when this prosciutto is ready to cut up and start to eat and start to enjoy. I'm going to also make a calculation so I can minus off. We added roughly 800 grams of Sunya to this, so we need to calculate for that. So I'll convert that into ounces, and when I'm checking my weights periodically, I'm going to measure, weigh against those amounts, and check and see how it's ready. So right now, it lost a lot of weight in a fairly short period of time. To move to that final stage, this could take 8 months, it could take 12 months. It really depends on the conditions where you're going to be hanging it inside your chamber. But you're going to go by weight, you're not going to go by time. So you do need to have some means of measuring accurately to make sure things are ready to go. So this is all set. If you have enjoyed the first 3 videos, please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you'll get a notification when I come out with the 4th video. So what the 4th video is going to be about, it will be what do we do with a prosciutto after it's all set to go. So if you've never bought a whole prosciutto and had to carve one out, I'm going to go through the steps of how you carve it, how you remove the bone and get it into the chunks, and how you start to slice it so that you can use it on a charcuterie tray or in any recipes that you would use prosciutto for, and you can start enjoying that with family and friends. I'm also going to start to put together videos of a number of the other cured meats that I do throughout the year, so you'll start to see them coming out periodically. Prosciutto is the one that takes the longest period of time. A lot of the other ones that I make can be done in a much shorter period of time, so you can start to enjoy them a lot quicker. Thank you again for joining me in the kitchen, and have yourself a wonderful day. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.